Good morning and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Leukaemia Foundation on nutrition and blood cancer. My name is Linda Saunders and I will be facilitating today's webinar along with my colleagues Jenny Burke and Jay Manning. We'd like to start today with an acknowledgement to country. The Leukaemia Foundation acknowledged the traditional owners of the various lands from where you are viewing today. We recognise their continuing connection to the land, sea, community and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, emerging and anyone else with us in the room today. So thank you again and welcome to this very special event. From the questions that we regularly receive on our 1-800 support line, we know that many of you are interested in maintaining the best health you can during blood cancer treatment, recovery, and beyond. Diet forms a major part of this, and it is easy to get lost in the well-meaning advice and diets suggested by people around us and by what we might discover online. We are delighted to have an expert in nutrition to guide us through the facts and fiction about blood cancer and diet. And we are lucky enough to have a guest chef who will be demonstrating some recipes he has developed for you to use at home. In addition, we will be very proudly sharing the Leukaemia Foundation's newly revised Eating Well booklet. This is a collaboration between the Leukaemia Foundation and our very own special guest, Nathalie Cook, OAM. A copy of this booklet is available on our website, which we will share the link with you in the chat, along with our most recent Talking Blood Cancer podcast, where we speak to Nathalie about her personal blood cancer experience and her very important advocacy work. So it's my pleasure to open today by introducing Nathalie Cook, OAM. Nathalie is an accredited practicing dietitian with over 25 years experience in community health, hospitals and private practice. She currently works at Banyule Community Health and the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service in Melbourne and previously trained and worked as a nurse at St Vincent's Hospital. Nathalie regularly presents on nutrition, inflammation and gut health at health professional and client forums. She has published many articles in nutrition journals and one publication in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry has received over 3,000 citations and is the highest cited paper in the journal. She publishes articles on nutrition and MPN for the Leukaemia Foundation's MPN News and presents at national and international MPN conferences. Nathalie herself lives with blood cancer, NPN polycythemia vera. This places her in a really unique position of being able to provide both a professional and personal perspective. Over to you, Nathalie.
Thank you, Linda. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome today to our session. I'm going to be talking about nutrition and blood cancer. And as Linda said, nutrition is a topic that people living with blood cancer often have questions about. So I'm going to start by talking about general healthy eating and including some information on gut health, and then talk about why nutrition needs vary across the blood cancer journey, a bit about managing treatment side effects, some common nutrition myths, the psychology of eating and how that can be impacted when we have a blood cancer, care and nutrition, which is also very important, and then some practical ideas on meal planning and healthy eating on a budget. So this here is a picture of the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, and it was developed by the National Health and Medical Research Council by reviewing hundreds of thousands of nutrition research studies from around the world. And it's showing the proportion of foods from the 5 food groups that we should aim to eat each day for good health. So it's showing the grain foods, and we should aim to try to choose minimally processed grain and cereal foods. And these give us vitamins and minerals and carbohydrate for energy. And then the fruits and vegetables should take up, you can see here, almost a third of the total amount of food we eat each day should be colourful fruits and vegetables. And they give us vitamins and minerals and fibre, which is really important for gut health. Then we need dairy foods, and these are important for bone health. Protein foods, and that's for every cell in the body needs protein, and the protein in our body is constantly being broken down and replaced, so we need protein every day. And oily fish is really important for health and for healthy blood vessels and cardiovascular health. And olive oil is one of the best oils that we can use in our cooking and salads, and of course drinking plenty of water. Now down the bottom you can see we've got some foods that says only sometimes and in small amounts, and they're all the things I like to call the sometimes foods or extra foods. So they're foods that are enjoyable to eat, but they really provide very little nutrition. So it's okay to have them occasionally, but if they start to be too prominent in our diet, they can take the place of the healthy foods that we need for good health. Now, another way of looking at healthy foods is thinking about eating a rainbow. And this is a lovely infographic that was from a recent paper that was published just this year in 2022 by Australian researchers. And they did a review of hundreds and hundreds of studies around the world looking at the bioactive pigments. They're the compounds in fruits and vegetables that give the lovely colours, and showing how all these different antioxidants and flavonoids, as we call them, confer health benefits. So by eating a range of these different colourful fruits and vegetables, we're taking in all of these wonderful plant compounds that have fantastic health benefits. And the researchers found that they're eating lots of these foods is associated with better health outcomes like healthy body weight, healthy lipid profile, reduced inflammation, and reduced risk of diseases like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, and overall mortality. Now, a really good way to eat a rainbow, and a diet that has been studied extensively around the world, or a diet style, is the Mediterranean style diet, because in the Mediterranean countries, there's lots of sort of variations of this type of diet, and they all have some things in common. So they heavily rely on vegetables and fruits and whole grains, olive oil, beans, nuts, legumes, and a range of herbs and spices, which are also really good sources of flavonoids or bioactive compounds. They include seafood several times a week, protein foods, and they limit meats, especially fatty meats and sweet foods, so all those extra foods. And if people choose to drink alcohol, it's in moderation, and they also drink plenty of water. But there's another thing about this Mediterranean style diet that's really good for our health, and that is physical activity and social connection. So eating together, so enjoying the company of one another. And this type of diet has been shown to reduce inflammatory markers. So they're things that doctors can measure on blood tests, and also lower coagulation, so blood clotting markers, and all causes of death as well. So it's a really healthy way of eating. Now, how do we put this into practice? So if you think of your dinner plate, if you aim for half the area on your plate, healthy, colourful veggies, and 1/4 of the plate area carbohydrate foods for energy, so things like potatoes, pasta, rice, and sweet potato or bread, and 1/4 protein foods, so meat, fish, chicken, legumes, etc., you're basically on the right track. So when you're cooking, think about that plate area. And even if you're doing a mixed dish where it's like a stir fry or something like that, where everything is mixed together, if you start with your ingredients in that sort of proportion, you'll be able to have the end product that's going to be a healthy meal with the right proportions for good health. Now, Another thing that we hear a lot about is the microbiome, and what we eat can actually have a big effect on the bacteria in our gut, or what we call the microbiome. So our body is covered with trillions of microorganisms, and they live in and on us. And most of them are in our gastrointestinal tract. And they actually include bacteria and fungi and viruses, and they are there and they help us stay well. So occasionally, as we all know, some viruses or bacteria can make us sick, but most of them that live in and on us are actually helpful for us for good health. And when we eat lots of colourful, high fibre, minimally processed plant foods, we're actually feeding the microorganisms that produce anti-inflammatory compounds called short-chain fatty acids that actually keep us healthy. However, when we eat those extra foods, so a diet that's high in fat and sugar and highly processed foods, we're actually, unfortunately, feeding microbes that produce pro-inflammatory compounds. So this shows us that our food choices really have a big impact on the balance of the different bacteria and gut microbes and impact our health. And when we compare the Mediterranean style diet with the Western style diet, we find that the Mediterranean style diet really helps get that good balance, or what we call microbiota symbiosis. So that means that the bacteria are in good balance. However, when we eat more a Western style diet that's highly processed and lacks all those beautiful fruits and veggies and whole grains, we tend to upset the balance of our microbiome, which is linked to poor health outcomes and chronic disease. Now, this is just showing what actually happens. So when we eat dietary fibre, not all of it is digested in the small intestine, and it makes its way to the colon or the large intestine. And what we call the commensal bacteria, so they're the bacteria that live in our gut and keep us healthy. They use that dietary fibre as their energy source, and they produce these compounds called short-chain fatty acids. And here's a few of them here: acetate, propionate, and butyrate. And they do some amazing things. So they actually feed the colonocytes, which are the colon cells that line the colon, and reduce local inflammation and reduce risk of bowel cancer. But as well as that, they're absorbed into the bloodstream and they're carried to the liver, where they're distributed throughout the body. And they have been shown to actually do amazing things. They lower blood pressure, they reduce inflammation. So there's lots of studies showing they're really helpful for things like rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, kidney disease, and also really important for mood and healthy brain function as well. And that's a whole another topic. So really, when we eat those foods that we know are good for us, we're feeding these little guys that live inside us and keep us healthy. So that's an example of why it's so important for us to eat that way. Now, I've just got here a table showing a low fibre diet and comparing it with a high fibre diet, just by making some little simple switches to improve the fibre intake. And we're meant to aim for about 30 to 40 grams of fibre as adults per day. And this is showing how, so in green, I've got the higher fibre alternatives, just showing how some simple changes you can increase that fibre each day. And also, when you do change to a high fibre diet, it's important to go slowly. So just make one change at a time, and that allows your gut and your digestion to become accustomed to that change, and also drink extra fluid or extra water. If you change too quickly, you might find you feel a bit bloated, but just allow your system to adjust by making small changes over time. Now, another thing that we need to think about to keep us healthy when we're living with blood cancers is maintaining strong, healthy muscles. And with age, we all lose muscle mass, and this is a process called sarcopenia. And it comes from a Greek word meaning poverty of flesh. And it was first described by a Dr. Rosenberg in the US a long time ago in 1989. And he published an article saying that there's no decline with age that's more dramatic or potentially more functionally significant than the decline in lean muscle mass. And we've all seen older people who seem so much smaller than they used to be when they're younger, and they're weak and they're frail and at risk of falls. And this is all to do with that loss of muscle mass over time. And it's also associated with poorer quality of life, as well as increased falls and increased infection and increased mortality. And it's associated with high inflammatory markers as well. So what can we do to prevent this? So there's two things that we can do. We can eat protein foods at every meal and try to get adequate protein each day, and also maintain physical activity. And that's beyond the scope of my talk, but engaging the help of a physiotherapist or an exercise physiologist just to keep active in whatever capacity you can in where you're at in your health journey. So what we should try to aim to do is to include 25 grams of protein per day, per meal, roughly, so about 20 to 25 grams per meal. And what I've done here is I've got sort of 3 choices for breakfasts, a lunch example and a dinner example, and snacks. And I've put the total amount of protein in each of those meals. And then where you see the little red asterisks, that's showing you what we call the high biological value proteins. So they're the proteins that contain the amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein that match our body's amino acid needs. So the proteins and amino acids in our own cells and muscles. So including those is really important, but the others add up too. So that's just some examples for you. Now we'll talk a little bit about nutrition across the blood cancer journey. And when people are first diagnosed with a blood cancer, it can be a huge shock, the diagnosis, and impact our whole sense of self. And that can impact our eating. So that's something, if you're newly diagnosed and you're feeling it's affecting your appetite, that's quite a normal thing to happen. Going through treatment, different treatments can affect us differently, and it can affect our appetite and our muscle. It can increase muscle loss and cause weakness if we're not eating enough. So when people know that they're going to be facing intensive treatment, things like stem cell transplant, things like that, it's really important to prepare by trying to eat nutritious, high protein foods and colourful fruits and veggies. And even gaining some weight before treatment can be really helpful to build reserves and assist you getting through that treatment and the outcomes. And at that time, it's a good time to try to limit the empty calories or the sometimes foods, because you're wanting to really build up your nutritional status in preparation for the treatment ahead that can affect your appetite and your food intake. Now, during intensive treatment, the advice is really tailored to individual side effects. And so the aim is to maintain a good nutritional status and to prevent malnutrition and to manage the side effects of treatment. And these can be things like it can affect appetite, they can cause nausea, but there's also lots of really good medications now to manage that. It can cause problems with sore or dry mouth, taste changes, and gastrointestinal symptoms like reflux or diarrhea or constipation. Now, these are very individual sort of side effects. So really, each person needs to discuss that if they're going through that with their healthcare teams, with their doctor and nurses and dietitian, and together they can help. And there's lots of ways you can be helped through that time to make sure that you keep your strength up and don't lose weight, and keep you as healthy as you can to help you with your treatment. Now, once you get to the stage of remission, or some of us have a chronic blood cancer where we don't have an intensive treatment phase early on, but we're ongoing, we're managing our condition. That time, especially when any sort of side effects have resolved, it's really important to resume general healthy eating. So like the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating that we talked about earlier, because we're not only trying to stay healthy to manage our blood cancer, but also to manage other chronic health conditions that we're more likely to get as we get older. So things like cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, all of those things are managed with healthy eating, as well as other medications and things. But healthy eating is the cornerstone of managing chronic diseases. And then as we get towards end of life stages, the emphasis is more on comfort and allowing people to have their favourite foods and drinks. And really the emphasis is quality of life over general nutrition advice that's important in earlier stages of life. Now, as we all know, and as Linda mentioned, there's a lot of information and a lot of misinformation available these days and online. And it's hard to know what information to follow when you're trying to do the best you can to look after your health. So be really careful and check your sources and see where that information has come from and whether it's from a credible source or not. And also some things, if they sound too good to be true, a rule of thumb is that they probably are. And also, before you make any major dietary changes or decide to take a nutritional supplement, it's best to discuss that with your treatment team, because just because you can buy something over the counter doesn't mean it's safe or it's innocuous and it can't be toxic or dangerous. And there can be interactions with your medication as well. So be sure to do that. And remember that there's no evidence that any food or supplement is a magic bullet or a superfood. There's no such thing as that. And again, the key to healthy eating is variety and getting lots of different colour and whole grains and lots of plant foods. Now, the Cancer Council has a really great site called iHeard. It's iheard.com.au, and it's got some fantastic frequently asked questions, and you can even submit a question there as well on a lot of popular things that you might have heard about linked to cancer risks. So that's a really good resource. Now, I'll just talk about some specific common cancer myths that we hear of. So things like people often ask, is a ketogenic or the so-called alkaline diet helpful for cancer prevention or treatment? And the response is no, that there's no special diet that can cure cancer. People sometimes ask about organic food, and there's no evidence that organic fruit and veg is higher in nutrients that prevent cancer than conventionally grown fruit and veg. So the Cancer Council recommends, as we said earlier, the 2 serves of fruit and 5 serves of veggies a day is really the only way to reduce the risk of cancers associated with getting enough fruit and veg. And this is whether they're organic or not. So the key is getting the adequate amount of fruit and vegetables. And you can also wash fruit and vegetables if you're concerned about pesticide residues on the outside of them. It's always a good idea to do that. People may ask about fasting. Is fasting helpful during chemotherapy? And no, it's not, because remember, during that time, it can be difficult to eat enough. And if you're limiting the time that you're allowing yourself to eat, it can actually increase your risk of weight loss and malnutrition. So really eating small amounts frequently over that time to get adequate food in is the key. People sometimes ask about dyes, food dyes. Are they linked to cancer? Do they cause cancer? Now, in Australia and New Zealand, we have the food standards, Australia and New Zealand, that approves the use of additives before they can be used by the food industry. And FSANZ actually considers the research on safety of consumption of these compounds across a lifetime. So they calculate how much people may eat over a whole lifetime. That's how they work out their safety. And yes, there have been some studies of some some food dyes that have been linked to cancer in rats, but that was at very high doses that it would be impossible for humans to consume that much. Then the other thing to remember is that most of these additives, the food dyes, etc., tend to be in foods that we're meant to be limiting anyway. So they're generally in those sometimes foods. So really, if we aim for mostly the minimally processed, colourful fruits and veggies and whole grains as the bulk of our diet, we're going to be limiting our exposure to these compounds anyway. Another cancer myth is, doesn't sugar feed cancer? And the answer is no. So what we need to do is step back and just have a little look at the physiology of cells and how they actually work. So all our cells use sugar, which is from carbohydrate or glucose, as the energy source. And cancer cells do grow faster than normal cells. And that's why they're cancer cells, because they're outgrowing other cells in an uncontrolled manner. And because they're fast-growing cells, they use more energy. So it's not that sugar feeds cancer, it's that cancer cells are hungry cells that are using a lot of energy. So no, sugar does not cause cancer. And then particular things like people might say, oh, turmeric is that good for preventing cancer? And again, there's no evidence that any particular food or herb or spice is a cure or prevention of cancer. The best evidence for cancer prevention is not smoking cigarettes, maintaining a healthy weight, getting plenty of physical activity, and eating a variety of colourful plant foods each day. And if you choose to drink alcohol, limiting your intake. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the psychology of eating when you have a diagnosis of a blood cancer. And obviously it causes stress and worry, and that can impact appetite and food choices, and that can all have consequences on nutritional status. And it's important for us to remember that we all have our own psychological relationship with food. So we might have our own food beliefs, thinking some foods are good foods or some foods are bad foods. And I like to think about everyday food and sometimes food. So, you know, if we should mostly eat those 5 food group foods every day, but it's okay to occasionally have foods that aren't particularly nutritious, say for a celebration, that's okay. The key is to be getting enough of the good foods most of the time, and for them to be most of the foods that we eat. And we all have our own food rituals and family traditions and food likes and dislikes, comfort foods that we might have enjoyed as children, and our memories and associations around food. And as I said before, when people are going through intensive treatment and they may be at risk of losing weight or they need to regain weight, they may be advised to have high protein, high energy foods and nutritional supplements. And this can be hard for people who've spent many years sort of watching their weight and trying not to gain weight. And it's a bit of a shift psychologically to be now eating foods that they would have considered before they shouldn't be having. But it's about understanding that your body's going through different challenges at that time, and that's what your body needs for that period of time. And also, when people are going through treatment and they may have changes in appetite and taste changes, etc., they may be worried about offending family and friends who want to bring them foods. And I'd say the best thing to do is, if people want to give you food or bring food to help, tell them what you'd like, and then they can make what you want to eat. Now, I mentioned earlier too that the person caring for the person who has the blood cancer, they need to make sure that they look after themselves too, so that they're fit and well. So just remember to try to eat regular meals, keep meals and snacks simple so that you don't have a lot of time, you know, a lot of your time will be taken up with caring responsibilities. So try to keep meals healthy and simple, and they can still be nutritious with very simple meals, and try to include protein foods at each meal. And again, focus on eating a rainbow to give yourself all those wonderful nutrients. And give yourself a break from time to time too, where possible. You could even use a meal time as a bit of a time out from your caring responsibilities. Now, practical food strategies during treatment, and going to hospitals and having treatment and going to appointments can take up a lot of time and really upset your normal routine of life. So try to stock up on staples in your fridge and pantry, like breakfast cereals, and tinned and frozen foods can be really handy. You can bulk cook and freeze meals, and Jason's going to show us some beautiful recipes soon for doing that sort of thing. And accepting help from friends. And as I said before, requesting a specific food or meal that you feel like is a really good idea. And again, including protein with your meals and snacks, and try to make every bite count with 5 food group foods. However, don't worry if you can't always do this. And sometimes you may need high protein drinks that may be easier to tolerate when you don't feel like eating. And that's where dietitians can help you, especially in a hospital setting or as an outpatient as well. Now I've just got here some ideas on budget shopping and meal planning, because as we all know, food prices have increased a lot lately. And I find a good way to prevent overspending when you're shopping is shop first in your pantry and your fridge. So look at what you've already got. And a lot of us have a lot of supplies already on hand that we might forget about and go and buy more. So see what you really need. Also look at specials in catalogues and see what's on sale, and then make a weekly menu and base that on the 5 food groups, but work out what you're going to eat for your breakfast, lunch and dinner and snacks, and then make your shopping list. And also try not to go shopping when you're hungry, because you can end up buying more than you actually need. Buying in bulk can often be a great cost saving, and compare those little tickets at the bottom at the supermarket, which shows the price per 100 grams, because it can be confusing when you're looking at different weights in packages. That's a good way to standardize it. And tinned legumes, so things like lentils and chickpeas, etc., can be less expensive sources of protein than meat and fish and chicken. So they're good to add to your weekly menu. Also, frozen and tinned foods are also nutritious, as well as fresh fruit and veggies. So a lot of people are worried that they're less nutritious, but they have their place in a healthy diet. And then if you make up, this is an example here of a shopping, this sort of pro forma, where you make sure that you're including those 5 food group foods. Okay, so we've talked about healthy eating is important across the lifespan, and eating a rainbow is a really great way of getting all those plant foods and together with all those amazing flavonoids, those bioactive compounds that are so good for us, and the fibre that's great for our gut health. And just remembering that nutrition needs are really individual across the blood cancer journey, and they change depending on what stage people are at. And treatment can have side effects that can impact appetite and taste and food preferences and cause gastrointestinal symptoms, but there's lots of help out there with health professionals that can work with you at that particular time. And remembering that after your treatment is finished and after the side effects have all resolved, it's really important to resume those general healthy eating guidelines for your overall health and for prevention of chronic disease. So that's really important. And remember, psychological factors can impact your eating, but most times they're just a passing thing that can affect us for a short time, and then we cope and adjust and seek help as well, and let people know and reach out, because there's a lot of help out there. Accepting help. If friends or family offer to make meals, accept their help because if they're asking, they want to help as well. And carers, remember to look after yourselves too. We need you healthy as well. And think about really planning menus, checking what you have at home can really help you budget and help you stretch your dollar further. Now, lastly, I've just got some websites that people might find helpful, so they can look at those as well.
Really great key messages in your talk then, so much to take on. We have had someone ask about your slide deck. We do encourage people to look at our new Eating Well booklet, which obviously you have contributed to, which will contain a lot of that information. So we encourage everyone to note down that link for your info. Just some of the key messages that I just want to reiterate to the audience that I think were really, really important and need to be highlighted. And that is that, Nathalie, you talked about that nutrition requirements over the blood cancer experience change and vary. And so what we see at diagnosis is not what someone needs in the immediate, in the acute phase of treatment versus what someone needs in that recovery or that remission stage. And I think it's important that means we need to, change gears with our diet over the course of blood cancer.
Absolutely.
That food in its simplest form, I think that simplicity, the message of simple is just as good, that we don't need to overcomplicate things. I think that's really reassuring to hear. The concept of the rainbow, I think it's a good visual image to keep in our minds around how, to remind us around healthy or good eating. Thank you for addressing some of those common myths as well. I think there's so much out there that can really confuse us when making decisions about our just general healthy eating versus eating with blood cancer. And also for acknowledging the importance of food in the context of relationships and our connection with other people, and our own personal connections with food. I think that plays such a big part in nutrition, our nutritional health during blood cancer. And those practical strategies at the end, the shopping and preparing meals, keeping things simple, really key in order to, we know that people living with blood cancer are experiencing lots of fatigue, low energy, mood, motivation is often a challenge. So those strategies are incredibly helpful. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Linda.
Now we're going to move across to our other wonderful guest speaker, and I'm just going to turn my page to keep up. Jason Roberts. Jason, a native of New Zealand. Jason discovered his passion for food at a young age, turning it into a career. He spent 7 years as an executive chef at Bistro Moncur. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Yes, you have.
Beautiful. In Sydney. My French is not my forte. Before he caught the attention of Channel 9 and hosted the cooking program Fresh 5 days a week. In 2003, Jason was introduced to the United States on ABC's Good Morning America and has since appeared on multiple networks promoting the importance of conscious eating and advocating for those less fortunate. Jason is the author of 3 cookbooks, including his most recent cookbook, Good Food, Fast. He's a dedicated partner of Share Our Strength's No Kid Hungry campaign, where he serves as a spokesperson and advocate to help end childhood hunger in America. His passion for fitness and desire to help others pushed him to launch Chef's Cycle for No Kid Hungry in 2014, an annual fundraising event featuring award-winning chefs fighting hunger outside the kitchen. Jason regularly travels the world as a guest speaker at top food shows and culinary events. He's the founder of @G'day Neighbour, an Instagram live chat. Come for the food, stay for the conversation, actually. Leaning into some of the bigger conversations where food has become the catalyst for connecting communities around the world. Thank you so much, Jason. I'll hand over to you. Jason is going to share with us some wonderful recipes and do a cooking demo of how to keep food simple, nutritious, and just give all of us here some inspiration. Thanks, Jason.
Hey, guys. All right. So, g'day, neighbour. How are we doing, everybody? a great opportunity to be here and chat with you all. Am I meant to push a screen here, guys? No, all good. You guys can see. Okay, cool. A great opportunity to be here. But I think what we need to quickly jump into first is James had asked, what do I think about tofu? James, I don't think about tofu at all, actually. I do eat tofu sometimes, though. I think we need to trim that bio quite a lot because it's quite irrelevant. What I would love to share with you is that I'm actually here for you all. Cooking to me is intuitive, and I'm an open book. And if at any point, not only through this, but even after this, I would love for you to have access to me and my knowledge. I love that Nathalie really brought up this idea of the rainbow, because this is simplifying food at its best for me, because it's the way I eat. I like my food to look colorful. So if there's one go-to thing I would recommend that you guys do is to take a cutout of the food pyramid that has been suggested, maybe an image of the rainbow, and maybe an image of how you see yourself and what you want for yourself, and put that on your fridge as your go-to, because those things are important to me, and I think it's a good reminder of how you should eat. The things I want to cook for you today are pretty basic. We're going to start off with, let's just start with it anyway. So energy bars, I'm going to do it right here on my lap because I'm that guy. And I don't have a lot of table space. So nut bars, energy bars are a great way to sort of get some of your extra protein powder and sort of things to increase the powder. I think firsthand, I was a carer for my dad through his illness. And I realized in the moment that he would only eat what he would eat. So it doesn't matter what I tell you, what recipe that you have that I've suggested, you're only going to eat what you eat. So you can chop and change some of the elements to this. So this particular one that I've given you, I think has almonds and dates and things. But to be honest, I only used up what I had in my cupboard. So I was probably short some things and filled with others. So I've got hazelnuts instead of almonds. I've got some walnuts. So this is going straight into a food presser. Everything's just going to get mulched up. So nuts and any nuts. Hazelnuts, walnuts. I'm using a balance of dried figs and dried dates. I may have eaten one of those whilst I was waiting. Quite delicious. I'm going to add some chia seeds, and maybe we can chat through this a bit later, but Nathalie would probably share the benefits, obviously, and already has the benefits of good fiber and soluble fiber. So I add chia seeds. Flax seeds are also good. Psyllium husk is also another one. But make use of what you have. Don't necessarily rush out and buy something new, but intuitively have an understanding of the nuts, the protein, energy as far as, dates and figs. These things are also binders, as are sultanas. So the chia goes in. Because it's important to eat what you like, I'm going to throw in some chocolate. I still like chocolate. That goes in. I'm going to add some protein powder. One of the questions that came up, I think, I've got a spoon there. No, let's just pour it in. I'm going to add some of this. This is protein powder. Someone asked what sort of protein powder would you suggest? And I guess given what's depending on where you are and what stage you're at and where you're going through chemo at the moment, or you're in recovery, or you're just about to start your journey, it sort of comes down to your own personal needs. And I think one of the highest sources of protein, as far as protein powders, would be your whey protein. There is also an egg white protein, which delivers quite high protein as well, which you could also add to this. And then olive oil. You might see recipes that'll have coconut oil. I use olive oil because I use olive oil on everything. I've even mentioned probably about 2/3 of a cup. So I don't really measure a lot of stuff. I want you guys to sort of start thinking along those lines. At the end of the day, okay, a little bit more. At the end of the day, when it comes down to making whether it's a bar or a ball, like an energy ball, something to get you through. This is a snack. This is something you make once and you've got for the next week, sort of thing. They'll keep perfectly well in the fridge. I'm just going to put the lid on that.
Jason, can I just mention before you blend that up that we're going to share the recipes. So if people are trying to madly write down ingredients or trying to work out sort of amounts, we will share that. So just sit back and relax and enjoy the demo.
Apology, guys. I didn't realize you didn't have the recipes already. I'm kind of going to EMT them to you right now. Did you get them in your inbox? Go. Got it. Okay, so you will get all these recipes. But even when you get these recipes, just go away with the knowledge that food is intuitive, and the things that I'm sharing with you now, And the recipes that we're sharing are basics. They're blank canvases for you to chop and change some of those things. So you're not overspending on things that you may already have already in the cupboard as far as nuts and dried fruit. So I'm going to hold on to this because it makes a bit of noise. Oh, I forgot one thing. I forgot to add a bit of coffee. I add a bit of coffee. I call these espresso brownie bars. So I'm adding a tablespoon of coffee. That just goes in. So one, and I need a bit more because I didn't have much energy. And this is why egg cooking is intuitive. It comes down to what you need in the moment. Oh, I'm also adding a pinch of salt. Someone mentioned in the comments before about not being able to have salt, and that just reminded me. A lot of foods that I cook, and I have people who've asked me for no salt diets and things like that. I just increase the amount of spices I use, but particularly things like coriander seeds, fennel seeds, cumin seeds work really well. And you change the method in which you cook. So instead of boiling foods, you may roast them. So they increase their own sugars increase and they caramelize. So you don't need a lot of salt. Food inherently has a lot of salt in it. You don't need to add salt. But for those who, with a Western palate particularly, we tend to add salt on everything before we've even tried it. So anyway, so mixy. Ultimately, we want to get to a consistency where things just sort of start to come together. Think of it like breadcrumbs that start to sort of break up, and then with a little more moisture, they just start to come together. Okay. So without going too far into it, what I want to do is just show you that once we press this mix together, just to give it, whoops. No, who's going to clean that up? The mixture sort of just balls up together and you can press it into a baking tray and then put it into your fridge. You don't need to bake it. But the whole idea is that you end up with an energy ball or bar. It doesn't matter what shape you fashion it to, but then keep it in the fridge. The reason I use olive oil over water, because I feel if you try and keep that bar for over a week and a half, mold will start to appear because you've increased the amount of oxygen in your food as well. So keep it refrigerated. I choose the oil. You may want coconut oil. It's because of the MCT value. That's entirely up to you. Maybe Nathalie can tell you what MCTs are. That was a big word for me, even though it's only 3 letters.
That brings
medium
up actually
chain fatty acids.
And Jason,
olive oil is probably good.
Sorry, Nathalie. Sorry, Jason. A question, because Jason, that actually reminds me. You talk about, where best to keep the bar in terms of just general food hygiene and food preservation. Nathalie, do you have any tips around that?
Yes.
Obviously people with blood cancer have to be particularly cautious around how they keep and keep food. So a couple of quick tips.
Yes. Look, Linda, that's again, it's individualized depending on where they're at. And it's usually if they're immunosuppressed because of their treatment. So often if people are having a stem cell transplant, their white blood cells, when they're very low, they're at increased risk of infections and foodborne infections. So at that point, you'd be following the advice of your healthcare team and they would let you know. And generally they say to keep away from, like salad bars and soft serve ice creams and pâtés and soft cheeses and things like that, that you could normally tolerate. But at that time, when you're immunocompromised, you may become sick. So that is just for that particular short time until your white blood cell levels have recovered. So keeping things in the fridge is a really good rule of thumb, especially in warmer weather for all of us. Anything that's perishable, not leaving it out at room temperature or in the danger zone, as we call it, which is room temperature, where the bacteria start to grow. So in the fridge, under 4 degrees, it inhibits bacteria from growing and keeps our food safe for longer.
Great. Thanks, Nathalie.
All right, guys. So just then, obviously, another great one. So that's just a basic snack. Like I said, whether it was a snack bar or a ball, it's entirely up to you. But press it into a tray, keep it in refrigeration. You can portion them up into bite-sized pieces, and then they're just ready for when you are, and I guess when you have a moment when you are hungry. I want to show you everyone knows how to make a smoothie. It's a blender and a whole lot of stuff in it. But I think the thing that I've really come to understand, and over the years, I guess with blood cancers, is you need to eat when you can eat, sort of thing. And it's a great way to sort of get a little bit more increased protein into your diet as well. All right, so I like this one because I like the value of adding, if we're talking about eating the rainbow, because I can keep this completely green. So half an avocado. Oh, what? Avocado on the smoothie? Yeah, it's a thing. That spinach, for those who love spinach, it'll break down. So we're going super green. Washed spinach, by the way. Okay, I didn't wash the spinach. But you need to wash the spinach. We're going to go full cream dairy milk. Is that good, Natalie? Full cream dairy milk?
That's fine, yes.
And for those who had, I guess, dairy intolerances, there are other, or nut tolerances, there is oat milk. There are plenty of plant-based milks as well. On top of that, I'm going to add some full cream yogurt, some Greek yogurt as well. We're also going to add some, and if you're making it, you get to lick the spoon. So, the other thing I'm going to add to this, and I really like it, is half an apple. I'm just going to take the core out of it, just so it breaks down too. I'm going to add half an apple, because I like this idea. It's a little bit sherbety in flavour. It's got a bit of a tang to it as well. Apple, avocado, spinach, full cream milk, full cream yogurt or Greek yogurt. I'm going to add my protein powder. And I'm just going to add a scoop. I mean, that's the recommended dosage on this one anyway. So a scoop goes in. Anyone got any favorite flavors they just want to throw out there that they're currently doing? Maybe there's a bit of an idea as a forum. They could put some flavors out there that we haven't discovered. Mandarins I've been using a lot lately in smoothies. I just put a whole mandarin in, and I'll explain why later. Where I put this a washed mandarin in there, and I love the flavor of mandarin, but also that flavor of the skin. And then I just blitz it up. I think it's really important when you think food as well, that what you're eating not only nourishes you, but there's a sense of nostalgia for you as well. And so if I drink a smoothie, it sort of reminds me of being a kid, probably because I was drinking thick shakes, but this big, thick, yummy, unctuous smoothie is nostalgic for me too. So I like it when it's nice and thick. Oh, I love that pour noise. And I'm pouring it in a wine glass because it feels fancy. Also delicious, but a smoothie is also a blank canvas. Cheers to you, Terry. Yeah. Cheers to everyone watching and tuning in. Now I'm actually going to stand up because most chefs don't really sit down when they're cooking. So let's move over to the kitchen. Guys, one of my favorite, I'm going to cut my head off there, aren't I? One of my favorite things to use in the kitchen, I guess, and more so in the cooler months, and maybe something for you guys to think about, and I know certainly lethargy is a big problem when you're dealing with treatment, is some of the, now you seem too far away. Hold on a second. It's coming close to that's better. I know lethargy is a big thing, and it's something I noticed my dad wasn't well. It was how tired he was, but also how tired I was, and now I've cut my head off again. I just remember. I remember dealing with just feeling really tired, and the idea of being able to put an electric appliance on. This is not me trying to sell you an appliance by any means, but it has everything to do with, well, what if I just put the food on and then lie down and have a nap, sort of thing. And what if you do sleep for an hour and a half? It's probably really beneficial to you, but at least the appliance will turn itself off, and when you get up, the food will be ready. So I like the idea of pressure cookers. An electric pressure cooker is very good. Slow cookers are very good. I think ultimately the whole idea is that we're getting protein-rich foods. So what I've come up with is actually a bit of a play on an old favorite, coq au vin. It's a fancy fresh dish with chicken basically cooked in wine. I just removed the wine. Party pooper. you could use a small amount, and we've already had that conversation. But I wanted something that was wholesome and rich, something that reflected the market, and also something that was conscious of the increase in food costs at the moment as well. Let's pull this down a little bit. So I'm going to start off with my pan. I'm going to heat my pan up. Well, actually, I've got to turn this pan on quickly. Bear with me 1 second, kids. It's a lot of power. I have a lot of power tools, you see. They all need to be switched on. Okay, now we're on. So I thought we'll start with the basics. So washed vegetables. I have onion, carrots, celery. This is a base for a lot of vegetable dishes and stews and things that I like to make. So I'm just going to take a carrot. The other thing that I have gone and bought, normally I buy a whole chicken. And I was thinking, when I was putting this recipe together, you know what? You may not even have the energy to break down a chicken or cut a chicken into pieces. So just buy them in pieces. For some reason, chicken seems to be cheaper than cabbages and lettuce at the moment. It blows my mind that this is the world we now live in. So you can probably have a very protein-rich dish at a more affordable price. So I'm going to add a carrot, chopped, go in. The other thing to remember, and maybe something, and this is about being intuitive too, something to think about. A recipe may call for a cup of this or a cup of that or 120 grams of something or whatever, and you're dealing with a carrot. Well, don't measure half a cup. Put the whole bloody thing in. Don't waste it. Don't leave that sitting thing, because eventually you're going to get to it. Sometimes chefs don't necessarily write the smartest recipes for those at home. So this is why cooking is really intuitive. When you buy something, you use it up. You don't want to waste it. You don't want to go into landfill. More important, you want it to go in here and to provide nourishment for you. There will be variances in flavors and finishes, but no one's really going to know. And you can't really stuff it up unless you've either burnt it or you forgot to cook it. So let's go straight into the pan. I'm going to add, I don't even know if I'm following my own recipe right now, but it's intuitive that the food goes in the pan, okay? Let's just get one thing done at a time. I'm going to add some an onion to it. For some reason, most French dishes seem to start with one chopped onion. All right. I thought I could prep all this in advance, and then I thought, well, that's not really fair on you, because then it's like, oh, he's a chef and he's got someone who preps all his food. Well, it's not true, because I do prep my own food. But if there was one thing I'm sure you could all do with at home, and that's your own personal chef. Actually, I could do with my own personal chef. I can tell you, it's been quite the year for me with dealing with a few different things in my own world, and brain fog has really set in, and maybe Nathalie could probably understand or probably describe why. But I feel like that we all go through it. I really love that, Nathalie, that you brought up this idea of carers looking after themselves, and it's something, a conversation that we had in the beginning, because you do forget to look after yourself, and then if you don't look after yourself, you can't really look after anyone else, because you're tired and you're exhausted. So those meal times and sitting down together and honoring that, taking that moment for yourself is really important. So that brain fog had set in, and even as a cook for 32 years, I was forgetting how to cook for myself. So it was an important conversation, and to see that slide come up was powerful for me. Thank you.
You're welcome, Jason. Absolutely. And I think we can get overloaded too when we're caring, and the stress and the change of routine and all that pressure builds up. And so that's where keeping it simple is so important, isn't it?
Yeah. So I have an old recipe for coq au vin, and I went through it. I jumped through it, and I trimmed the fat out of it, to be honest, just to start off with a very basic recipe. So onions, carrots, celery, and even the chicken. I don't even know. I can't remember because I don't have the recipe in front of me. I may have even mentioned to brown the pieces of chicken. If you brown the chicken in the base of a pan, of certainly a pressure cooker or anything like that, and you start to turn it and it caramelizes, that just promotes more flavor. But if you don't brown it, you'll have a different flavor. So don't feel obligated to follow all the steps. At the end of the day, as long as the food is cooked through to the end, you can change seasonings and flavors. You could add different spices and what have you. But caramelization and even browning the vegetables will create a little bit more sweetness. You're reducing the moisture content, increasing the flavor. And I think to most people who are listening today, and we do see you and we really do acknowledge you, this is why we're doing this too, is that Don't be too hard on yourself. But refer to that food pyramid for basic, things that you need to get through. But I love that idea of putting an image of what I want myself to look like and be. And it's someone who's strong. And if I go to the food pyramid first and I acknowledge that, I will get to that. I think that's a line of purpose, because that brain fog sets in. And sometimes you probably wake up in the morning going, I just don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where my support is. I don't know what it looks like. But if I see that image, I go, oh, that's it. It's a trigger. I think that's powerful, as is the smell of food, by the way. I'm sorry you're not getting this.
Jason,
All right,
someone's asked, someone has asked, would you use alcohol-free wine?
Why?
Yeah. Look, you don't need to
Yes.
worry about adding alcohol into cooking because it evaporates. So you're actually left with the flavour, and the alcohol content is gone. So from the point of view of alcohol, you don't need to worry.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will share with you, there is a great product that Maggie Beer had brought out, and there are other brands that have it called Bell Juice.
Yeah.
It's unfermented green grape juice, and it also provides that tang and that fruitful note. So there are options.
Yeah.
Even I find if you're not adding alcohol and you cook the same dish without the alcohol, even at the end, a good squeeze of fresh orange juice or lemon juice really brightens everything up, as does a handful of chopped fresh herbs. I just wanted to show you, like I said, cooking's intuitive. I went to my local market last night and I was thinking I'd get some chicken thighs. I threw some chicken thighs in there, but I saw some chicken legs. You probably need to see raw chicken legs, but they were really cheap. And I thought, if I cook this one big cook now, it'll give me enough food probably for about 4 or 5 meals. So I sort of moved away from that my own recipe for a second. Thought, well, I'll make the most of this cooking moment. I'll cook all this food up at the same recipe, just with fermented sort of on special chicken legs. They weren't off, thankfully. Going to add a little bit more olive oil. So the whole line now is just to encourage a little more flavor by browning some of the ingredients together. Okay, what else? Oh, so I'm adding mushrooms to this. You could split the mushrooms, but I've got these little agaricus chestnut mushrooms. Agaricus is the family, and I actually said that to make me look smart for a second. So they're going to go straight in. If they're quite small anyway, any large ones, you could, like that one, you could cut into quarters. But once again, if you don't like mushrooms, don't add mushrooms. If you don't like chicken, use a different cut of meat. But the cuts of meat you'd use, certainly when it comes to a pressure cooker, are those secondary class, or the non-loin cuts, shoulders, shanks, shins, anything that has a lot more collagen in it, which I certainly think is beneficial for gut health. I love that Nathalie talked about that, I think the gut biome, and some of my own personal, I guess, conversations had with friends, and just having that understanding of how the gut relates to the brain and that conversation between the two. I feel sometimes when I have incredible brain fog and I go, yeah, no, I haven't been eating well. I don't think I've hydrated enough. Like, it's quite incredible when you're eating well, how much more clarity you have. So something to really hone in on and be conscious of as well. All right, so I'm going to add the rest of those mushrooms. I also, this is not on the recipe card, but I had a quarter of a pumpkin. Use it up now. It's not a garbage pit, by the way. It's not a garbage pit. It's a great way to use up some of those things without having to waste food at the same time. All right, so I'm just going to remove that skin. If anyone has any food questions, now's probably a good time as well. If you want to throw them out there, I know there's Q&A later. If there's anything food related, please feel free to sort of throw it in the comments, because I think this is an opportunity. As much as I love buying cookbooks, the idea of writing another cookbook doesn't make sense to me, because I want to be accessible to people. I want you to be able to ask me those questions when you're reading a cookbook, where the ins and outs are, what I can and can't do. All
Jason,
right, so pumpkin. Yes.
Can I ask you, obviously not everyone has a pressure cooker at home, so could you perhaps describe how you would prepare this meal in a different type of kitchen appliance, or on stovetop, or in the oven? What would be the alterations or considerations?
Do you mean outside of rubbing two sticks together? Yeah.
Yes,
Good,
correct.
good question. You could absolutely put this in your oven. So you would start stovetop in a bigger pot, preferably something with an oven-proof handles. Set your oven at about 140 degrees Celsius, and then put that into your oven, and it would cook away probably for chicken legs or chicken thighs. And once it was boiling at the stovetop into the oven, probably for about 40 minutes would be enough. The pressure cooker. What the pressure cooker will do, oh, sorry, that was a tin of tomatoes. What the pressure cooker will do is provide something that will cook in probably a third of the time. But an electric pressure cooker or an alarming pressure cooker will also give you something that will turn itself off. And that's where I see the benefits of a pressure cooker. But if you cook in the oven versus the stovetop, also that little bit safer too. If you leave a gas knob on or something, things will just burn out. Whereas you've got a little bit more time, your temperature control in the oven as well. I'm adding some chicken stock. I think it's a litre I've called for. That goes in. And then we put the lid on. So pressure cookers, what we have these days, which we're lucky with. Oh, there we go. Only I knew how to close it. Ta-da! So modern pressure cookers these days, certainly an electric pressure cooker, they have the benefits to them are great because a lot of them will have their own sort of a program which will tell you, oh, I'm cooking chicken, or I'm cooking beef, or I'm cooking veggies, or something like that. So go with what the recommended guidelines are for how to cook them. You can absolutely just whip that straight into the oven if you're cooking in a nice pot. This will probably take about 20 minutes, and if we get time, I can open up and show you what's going on the inside. In the recipe itself, I added a tablespoon of flour just to thicken things up. You could also add maybe half a cup of rice or oats to also thicken. I think that's it as far as that particular dish. Outside of that, and because of timing, I don't even know where we're at the moment. But what I wanted to show you is, and I know we spoke a little bit on this, was to give you an idea of snacks, like a smoothie, something grab and go sort of thing, something to try and give you some sort of sustenance and make you feel okay at the moment. Because no one's ever really going to know your journey. You're the only one who's going to know that food journey, what you do and don't need. But I love the idea that we could discuss the idea of a sweet treat, like a cake or something. So I did knock up some mandarin and almond cakes this morning, and I thought, well, I will just show you what one would look like if you made it. But they're really delicious. This is actually gluten-free. It's dairy-free, but I'm going to serve it with probably ice cream or a big slab of yogurt anyway. But the recipe you will have access to this recipe, but everything just goes straight into a blender or a food processor. It is almonds, it is whole mandarins, it is eggs and baking powder, almond meal, pinch of salt if you like. That is it, and it's baked in the oven for about 40 to 45 minutes, about 170 degrees Celsius. But you do have that recipe. Sugar is okay. That cake does smell delicious.
Actually, Jason, just talking about sugar there, and obviously that is a question that a lot of people have, and Nathalie did speak about sugar and the relationship with cancer, or cancer causing, or cancer accelerating. And so it's good to be able to see that you are cooking with sugar. There was a question in the chat where someone asks about sugar alternatives like, maple syrup or honey, or could you, use those as an alternative to sugar? And I guess, would it, an extension of that, would it change the consistency or to the final product?
When it comes to cooking, absolutely. Because if you're talking about baking, absolutely, because you rely on the mechanics and the density of certain things. So if I was making this particular cake, and you were to reduce sugar to maple syrup, it'd be a lot wetter. Without having a lot of experience, for those who are just wanting to go, oh, could I just change that? You wouldn't go and add 250 grams of maple syrup. You'd probably add maybe 2/3 of a cup. But the consistency of the almond meal and the batter would change, but it would still bake. I think ultimately you could try it once, and then you could up the amount of almond meal the next time. But some things you can replace, some things it's the mechanics, like making an Italian meringue or something. If you're making a lemon meringue pie or something, the sugar you would need, because you rely on sugar for structure. Okay, but that's generally only with flake.
Makes sense.
That's generally only with baked goods. Anything else outside of that sugar, yes, you could use coconut nectar or rice brown nectar or things like that. There has been many recipes that I have written where I don't use sugar as well.
And something else for people to remember too, that all those other sugar alternatives, they're all going to break down to glucose and fructose in our body anyway. So it's really about a taste preference. There's really not a lot of difference nutritionally in them as well.
Oh, that's good that's a good clarification. I think,
and a cake is a treat, and it's the enjoyment of life, and it's not something you're going to have all the time. So really choose the sugar or the sweetener that you enjoy.
Yeah. Someone mentioned some of those preempted questions that we had got, or someone had sent in, and I think they're quite general as far as simple recipes and easy meals. I'd love to think that you guys could see what I did today. I'm a little bit hectic and I apologize for that, but I hope that you could see them. They're blank canvases. A smoothie, a nut bar, an energy bar is a blank canvas to deliver more energy, more protein. Even the chicken and mushroom stew sort of thing. The convenience of an electric appliance like a pressure cooker or a slow cooker is really handy. And I noticed someone said they do a lot of dump cooking, I think they call it, or where they prepare in advance. I think it was Tracy. Due to fatigue, I've started preparing dump bags for a 3 to 5 day menu. I freeze some to and put them in the slow cooker, and this has helped my family and me tremendously. Getting ahead on some foods when you have the energy is really important, because there's probably many days where you go to, I can't bloody do this. I don't do this. I've got I'm trying to look after a family. Everyone's sort of really pooling together. So the benefits of some of these appliances, just to give you some, some respite down the track, is when you do prepare in advance. One of the other questions that we got, and I thought was really important, is low cost meals. Now, at the start of COVID, when the world was ending, and I thought we had to ration everything we potentially owned, I think I managed to stretch a box of Uncle Toby's oats for 2 weeks. I made porridge for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but I turned them all into, so there were savory porridges, so things that you potentially do on a stir fry, so like broccoli and fried egg went into it, and it was a great blank canvas. I found that I could create meals for $1 and $2, but that was cooking for myself. But I could do basics like a savory porridge or what have you. But I knew that I was getting carbohydrates, I was getting good sources of protein, and I could do it quite cheaply as well.
I will hand over to Jay, who is going to lead us with some of the Q&A from the pre-submitted questions that we received. So over to you, Jay.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Jason and Natalie, both really interesting and fantastic presentations. And yes, smell-o-vision would be awesome, I would say. So a few questions. There's been a couple of questions, both in the pre-submitted questions and in the chat, about fasting. And I guess it's a bit of a topical thing at the moment, isn't it? Fasting diets.
Yes.
So Natalie, do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Yes, look, when people are healthy and they're not going through treatment, there are various sort of fasting. You might eat only in a window, so it might be 8 hours or 12 hours over the day. And those things, historically, lots of cultures around the world have had different sort of eating patterns. And I guess it's a bit of a reaction to Western style eating, where people are sort of snacking and nibbling on things all the time. That's the other extreme, and often sort of processed packaged things. But really, when we're thinking of health during the blood cancer journey, we really need to think about where we are, or where the person that we're caring for is at that time. And if they're going through a period of time where they're having treatment and it's difficult to eat enough, well, it's not going to be a good time to limit the opportunities for eating when they're already struggling to get enough in over the day. So I guess it comes back to using common sense. If we are going to do, there's no benefit in fasting, especially for days at a time, at that time when your body really needs that nutrition to get you through those extra challenges that your body is facing. So again, talk to your healthcare team and see what's right for you at that time. But once you've come through the treatment, you might find that you also have type 2 diabetes. You might have be wanting to try a sort of intermittent fasting, which still includes all of the foods that you need in the day, but you might just be limiting those extra snacks that you're having and eating your main meals and cutting back on those things that aren't as healthy anyway, but still getting everything that you need in over that day. So really it's an individual thing. Speak to a dietitian, speak to your treatment team, especially if you're going through treatment and you've got questions on fasting.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Jason, you got some ideas. If people only really like bland food, and certainly when you're having chemotherapy treatment, that's often something that people don't like to use a lot of spices in their cooking. Have you got some suggestions for things that will make things more tasty? And it could just be using the rainbow, I guess. That could be a simple way, using the colourful foods. But have you got any other top tips?
I think if you look along, if you feel along the lines of people who are sort of more used to bland foods, I still think spices can be quite tricky. But I sort of feel like people who need to reduce salt or cut salt out, spices really work. So I feel like some of the oils and fats really help when it comes to bland foods as well. So being able to cook potatoes, just basic potatoes, even just rice, and a little bit of extra virgin olive oil and a little pinch of salt is nice. Or a little bit of butter through it's really nice too. It just elevates the experience. It just gives you a little bit. If anything, it gives me comfort. And so I grew up on a dairy farm, and we ate meat and 3 veg probably 7 nights of the week. And so I grew up eating quite bland food. So tomato sauce was standard in our house. But I think even now there are those times, and know where I'm not well, or when I was dealing with COVID or whatever, it's like, I just want a basic chicken soup or a chicken broth, or I just want potatoes, or I just want rice. And I just know if I put a little bit of butter, that's that little bit of added energy I'm going to get for a little, and it does provide something else. So I wouldn't be too concerned about only ever really eating bland foods, but you do need to look at that pyramid when timing is right for you, and how you feel when it comes to sort of recovering and rebuilding. That rainbow is really, really important.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. That's some really good ideas. BMI and healthy weight, Nathalie. What do you think of the BMI measuring healthy weight options? And is that the only way to do it?
No, thanks, Jay. Look, no, it's not the only way to do it. And I think the BMI has looked at over populations, looked at where people tend to have less chronic disease. And so using it for individuals can be problematic because there's other factors that it doesn't take into consideration. So, for example, it doesn't take into consideration people's muscle mass. So someone might be a bodybuilder and have great big muscles and come up on a high BMI, which technically will say that they're outside of the healthy weight range. They might come up overweight or obese, but they're not. Okay. So it's really got to be interpreted in relationship to that person, and across cultures too, there's different bone structures. So say if you look at someone who has Asian genetic heritage compared to someone who, say, may have family who've come from the Pacific Islands, they're bigger people, and people from Asia tend to have smaller frames. So they could appear underweight when they're actually within the healthy weight range for them. So look, it's a tool that is used by health professionals as a general guide, but it's not the only thing. So it's really has to be interpreted with that person as well. And the other thing is that some people can be living in a larger body but still have really good health, and they may be eating all the right things and exercising, but for them, it's actually natural that they are at a higher weight, which may technically come out as a higher BMI, but they may still be healthy for them. Yeah.
Great advice. Thank you. Vegan and vegetarian options.
Yeah. Is that for me? Yes.
Well, probably for both of you,
Both of
actually.
you.
I
I
think.
think, look, I just say make sure that you're getting the 5 food groups in the proportions that we need for health. So vegan diets are where they don't have any animal proteins at all. And also with that, it's really important to make sure that you're not missing out on nutrients that are found in animal protein sources. So for example, meat is a really good source of iron and zinc. It can be hard to get it through plant foods. Dairy products are a really good source of calcium that's important for bone health. So if you're going to have a plant milk instead of dairy milk, I'd say make sure that it's got at least 100 milligrams of calcium per 100 mils, and that's going to give you a good substitute. Some of the plant milks are also lower in calcium, in protein, and protein, dairy products are a really good source of protein too. So make sure, really learn about plant sources of protein and make sure that you're having lots of different types so that you're getting that variety as well. So, and vegetarian diets, sometimes that they include some dairy, some animal products. So you might have, ovo-vegetarian, so they eat eggs, or lacto-ovo, they have milk and eggs, but they don't have meat. So there's lots of different variations. But really, if you're substituting, if you're taking something out, you've got to put that back in another form to make sure that you get everything.
Yeah.
What would you say, Jason?
I sort of love, from that perspective, I totally get that and totally understand that too. From my perspective, as far as being a vegan, vegans are people too. I love making vegetables the hero, to be honest. And I think this is just, I just think the world we live in, it's just that vegetables have become very expensive. So I love the idea of a whole cauliflower being like the hero, or a pumpkin being the hero, or a blackened cabbage being the hero. And I know as far as supplementation, or getting calcium and getting the right things, and from what I gather, we absorb iron from vegetables better when we're also getting heme iron as well from meat as well.
Yes.
So I don't think the idea is for anyone who is a vegan is to change your diet as such as like you need to eat meat all of a sudden. It's just like you just to be more conscious of what your body really needs. But vegetables, once again, just refer back to the pyramid. Ultimately, it comes down what you're going to be able to tolerate. Whether you're dealing with any any stomach issues at the same time. I noticed someone said, do we have any suggestions for someone who's taking medication for diarrhea at the moment? That's beyond my knowledge, but I know it comes down to what you can and can't do. But there are great sources of nutrients through wide variety, and just be open to trying different things too. Like tahini, sesame seed paste is a source of calcium. Not as good as not as much calcium as dairy, but there are other alternatives. And I think with the information that you've given today, Nathalie, and within that pyramid, I think everyone should be able to navigate this hopefully a little bit more, but also know that we're also here in your corner. This is not just now, but this is ongoing. Where your support through this too.
Absolutely, that's great, and I absolutely agree, Jason. And if you look around the world, all the different cultures around the world have traditionally eaten very different eating styles. And so there's lots of ways to eat a healthy diet as well. And that's something to remember too. And think back on whatever your family traditions are, what people ate traditionally. In most countries, they were basically healthy foods all around the world. And there's lots of ways to do that.
If there was one recommendation out of all of this, if you're vegan or meat-based or whatever it is, if you can start reducing some of those processed foods where you can't identify what the words are on the packaging, more whole foods are beneficial. Absolutely.
I remember hearing someone say once, if your great-grandmother wouldn't recognise it as a food, don't eat it.
I love that.
Great advice.
Love
Excellent advice. Can I just ask one last question about bone density? Because a lot of blood cancer patients have bone density issues.
Yes.
So what recommendations would you have? for people who want to improve their bone density?
Okay,
or managing
so
their bone density at least?
yes, good question, Jay. Making sure that they're getting 3 to 4 serves of dairy or dairy alternative that is calcium fortified a day. Having the all those colourful fruits and vegetables, because all those trace elements and things like boron and even the bioactive compounds, the flavonoids, they're all important for bone health as well. And having that even distribution of protein across the day, because we think of bones and we think of calcium, but we also need protein to maintain healthy bones. And then the other side of it is our body retains calcium and phosphorus and all the minerals that make up the structure of our bones through weight-bearing exercise. And you probably might remember that way back when the astronauts went off to the moon and they came back and their bone density had reduced because they were in a weightless environment. So gravity helps our body keep, because their bones are being remodeled all the time, and that pull of gravity is keeping our bones strong. So weight-bearing exercise sends muscle messages to our muscles and our bones to stay strong. So that's the other side of the equation. Eating the foods that contain the nutrients, the protein, calcium, etc., but moving our body in whatever way we can to keep our muscles and bones strong too. And
so I remember lots of walking.
Yep, lots of walking, exactly. Sorry, Jason.
I remember my grandmother telling me, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Absolutely. And that's the same with our muscles as well. We're all losing muscle. So I talked about the sarcopenia, and unfortunately it starts from about our 30s, about 1% a year naturally. And unless we keep using it, and I think about those examples like the 99-year-olds in the little islands in Japan that are still doing the same physical activity as the younger people and growing vegetables and climbing up mountains and things. And they don't have a concept of aging. And it's because they're using their body and it's staying strong. So they're fighting that normal breakdown with age. So it just shows that our body has that wonderful capacity to heal and to maintain itself if we do those things that keep it well, feed it well and move it.
So what I'm really hearing there, Nathalie, is that you're saying that twerking is good for us.
Yes, I guess as long as we're not sitting all day. That's right. Active work. Yes, exactly. Moving and yeah, using our body, exactly. As you said, if you don't use it, you lose it. Absolutely.
That's true. Yeah.
Can I just ask one last question? Actually, I think you covered it anyway for the most part, but if people have got vitamin and mineral deficiencies, what should they be doing?
Well, firstly, it's best to make sure that it's a diagnosed deficiency. So doctors can do blood tests. They can look at things like iron studies. They can look at stored iron and circulated iron. They can look at your red blood cells to work out if people are, say, iron deficient. People should be really careful to not just take things over the counter thinking, oh, this is a vitamin supplement, it's harmless because it's freely available. I don't need a prescription, so it must be harmless. And then the other thing is thinking, oh, if a little bit's good, more is probably better. And that is not the case. And even with things like vitamin and mineral supplements, they can decrease absorption. So say if you're having too much of one mineral, it can compete with absorption of other minerals. And even vitamins, like I was reading recently about a study that was done, or a report that was written about a person in Tasmania, an older man who he'd been told he had low vitamin B6, and he took a supplement, and then he was taking some other supplement that also contained vitamin B6, and he just continued to take that. And over the next 12 months, he had some mobility issues and he ended up in a wheelchair. And they found out that he was actually taking a toxic level that, because of his age and his reduced kidney function, he couldn't excrete it, even though it's a water-soluble vitamin. And so in his case, it built up to a toxic level that was harmful. So it's really important. Don't just self-medicate, even with vitamins and minerals. And if your doctor does say that you need a certain supplement for a short time, only take it for that prescribed period of time and then get retested to see whether you need to continue. Don't think it's harmless to just continue on it, and discuss it with your doctor.
That's great. Thank you very much. Excellent.
Pleasure.
Over to you, Linda.
Thanks, Jay. Well, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. We have gone a little over time, so I'm very mindful of that. Before we draw it to a close, I just wanted to invite both Jason and Nathalie, might be tricky, but to perhaps just share one key message that you'd like the audience to take away with them today.
Yes.
Before we close out. We'll start with you, Jason. Thanks.
Yeah. I think the real message for me, and this is something that sort of transpired probably because of the start of COVID. I know everyone's going through something different, but the thing is that you're not alone. That you do have someone in your corner in those moments of brain fog when you're sort of struggling. Is that don't be afraid to reach out and ask, because if you don't ask, the people who want to help don't have a place to put their help. So stay in this space with us, and we're here for you. So I'm grateful that we're here together. I lean on this community just as much as you will too, because I want to grow and evolve, but I want to share my knowledge with you too.
Thanks so much, Jason. And you bring up a good point about asking for help. And food is a really, really great way to be able to do that, isn't it? To be able to offer support to people through the way of food, I think is a way of supporting people through these tricky times. Nathalie.
Yes. Thanks, Linda. Great points there, Jason. Yes, I'd say just keep food simple. And, thinking back, a lot of us grew up with the meat and 3 veg, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's all good, healthy food. So keep it simple and eat a rainbow, because that's where we get all those beautiful phytochemicals, as well as the vitamins and minerals and fiber, and minimally processed. So don't be scared of, I saw you cooking up your carrots there. You didn't peel them. Those skins on our vegetables, when we can, pumpkin's a bit tough, but the others, they're really good for us too. So just keep it simple and enjoy all those beautiful coloured fruits and veg, and eat what's in season and pick and choose depending on cost, especially at the moment.
Yes. Yep. I couldn't agree more. Well, that draws our webinar to a close. Thank you to both Jason and Nathalie for a riveting, engaging, informative presentation, hands-on.
Pleasure to be here.
Presentation. Thank you so much for joining us again. Go well and see you next time.